Welcome back to Media7. 3.5 years after a hugely controversial series of police raids in Auckland, Wellington and Rotorua, the so-called Urewera 18 will finally go on trial on weapons and other charges on May 31st. But they won't be tried by a jury of their peers. High Court Justice Helen Wynne-Kelman declared in December that the trial would be judge-only. The decision was suppressed, or as we say in the world of celebrity infractions, top secret. But even after the fact of the decision was released just before Christmas, the story didn't seem to get the scrutiny it deserved. By our count, Stuff and the Herald website devoted 10 times as many words to Martin Devlin as they did to one of the most important criminal trials of our times. Jose Barbosa looks back on what is already a long, strange story.
The 15th of October 2007 is not likely to be soon forgotten by residents of Ruatoki, a small town in the eastern Bay of Plenty just north of the Urewera National Park. Police blocked the roads and swept through the town searching for evidence and suspects. At the same time, raids and searches were being carried out in properties around the country. In the end, 18 people were arrested, including Tūhoe activist Tame Iti. The police claimed they'd spent a year monitoring him and a paramilitary camp he was running in the Ureweras.
I believe that the action we took today was proper and proportionate.
However, almost immediately, the ninja-style tactics of the police were questioned.
This response has been completely heavy-handed, and I think it's totally disproportionate.
Our bus was stopped this morning, our school bus, with young tamariki on board, and it's a frightening thing to have guns in your face and all surrounding your vehicles.
We regret the fact that there were people not involved with what we were doing.
The following month, the Solicitor General declined to lay charges under the Terrorism Suppression Act, arguing the legislation was too complex and impossible to apply with the evidence collected during the raids. Instead, the 18 have been charged with a combination of firearm and drug offences. The accused will go on trial almost 4 years after the raids. In the meantime, the wait's been almost too much for the media, whose attention has withered away like early morning tumescence. So much so, by the time it was revealed that most of the accused had been denied trial by jury, the news was looking elsewhere.
Don't hassle the Hoff.
What had been the story of the year was now only worth a few paragraphs on the internet.
I knew he'd get the Hoff in there somehow. Well, Stephen Price is still with us, and I've been joined by Tautoko FM's Lani Sauter and veteran journalist Derek Fox. Welcome to you all. Stephen, you're the lawyer. The judge-only trial, is it unusual or unprecedented? How often does it happen?
Not very often, and I can say that with some confidence because we changed the law recently to allow it to happen more readily. For example, in cases of juror intimidation, but also in cases where jurors won't be able to perform their duties effectively. So that's the Crown made an application under that provision, saying the juries wouldn't be able to do this, the jury wouldn't be able to do it effectively, and argued for it to be before a judge alone because of that, and the judge granted it for reasons we're not allowed to go into.
Yes, the judge's reasoning is suppressed because it may prejudice the trial, but if we could speculate,
sure.
What reasons might the judge have made?
Well, we can talk about the fact is that one of them is how long the trial's going to be, and this one's been estimated at 3 months. That's publicly available information, and in the Law Commission's report that led to this change, they said that about 6 weeks is starting to look up there for jurors. It's quite an imposition on jurors to have to sit. They might not be able to come all the time. They get sick and have funerals to attend, and that can disrupt the trial. You've got to then look at the number of defendants there are and the number of issues they've got to deal with, and the complexity of kind of matching all of that up. And the complexity of the legal issues that they have to be told about and given evidence about.
So the nature of the evidence itself.
The nature of the offences, the nature of the evidence, the number of witnesses, the length of the trial, that's all going to be playing into the decision.
What would have been the countervailing arguments for a jury trial?
Well, there should be a kind of a sense that from the public that there's the imprimatur of their representatives on any result that comes out. Otherwise, it might be seen to be, not kind of valid. And some of the other some of the other defendants said, look, we really want a trial by jury, and if we can't have one, we'd like to have a separate jury on our own.
Yeah, 3 were separated, weren't they? Yes.
And there is an argument, I don't know if this argument was made, but in the back of the minds of the defendants might be this idea of jury nullification, which is a situation where juries can sometimes be persuaded that, whatever the law is, this is just not a case where they want to convict. Sometimes happens in euthanasia cases. And that's something that's not really going to be on the table for a judge-alone trial. Now, I don't know if that's really been their strategy, but it's a thing that is lost if you lose your right to a jury. You can't kind of make those, effectively make those appeals. And if they acquit in those circumstances because they think it's wrong to apply the law here, that's a just result.
Lani, what's been the response up north amongst your audience? Do people know that the defendants have been denied the jury trial? Is it a story up there?
Well, as much as it's a story nationally, I mean, it's been really hard to find any information about it. I mean, but people that I've spoken to about it up there, we all have a similar feeling about it, in that if it can happen to them, then who's next? You know, for us, I think we live in a different environment. We don't live in a city. We have guns. We have bush camps. We've got, you know, my son works in the bush often. My partner does. It's something that we do a lot, and so for some of us as well, we've got brothers, we've got cousins who've been using guns their whole lives to live with, and they may have a checkered past, and they may have some you know, strong political viewpoints that they're not afraid to voice publicly, and it kind of leaves us begging the question, well, if it can happen to our cousins in Tūhoe, can it happen to us? You know, because we're only a 4-hour drive away, but it's a whole different world, and I think that's really lost in a lot of the media coverage as well.
Derek, why do you think the issue of there not being a jury trial has been so, you know, scantily covered? It really has not been news.
You know, the whole point about the reportage of this case is one in which there's been manipulation by the police in particular. The police tipped off their little tame journos to say something was coming up. After thousands and thousands of hours of intercepting the conversations of people around this country, using unprecedented legislation to be able to interfere in our privacy, the Solicitor General said there is no case to answer under the Suppression of Terrorism Act.
Now, I should make it clear, we have you here as an experienced journalist, not as any kind of...
Not a terrorist or anything
not as
like
any
that.
kind of spokesperson for Tūhoe, because we got a bit of grief about that when we talked to them. As a journalist, if you had been offered, if you'd been at the Dom Post and you'd been offered those leaks from the police, what would you have done with them?
I'd have thrown them in the bin, because I know the area. I know the people involved. My son hunts up that valley every weekend or every other weekend.
So you are confident that when the evidence does finally come out, there'll be nothing to embarrass you, there will be nothing to indicate that police intervention was justified?
For God's sake, I'm hoping that they did spend 4.5 years doing something. Something, you know? Because otherwise some heads should roll. And heads should roll anyway. You know, when the Solicitor General said that particular evidence collected in that manner could no longer be used, what did the police do? They leaked it. They leaked it, and the Dom Post and the Waikato Times and other newspapers ran it.
It would be fair to say the interests associated with the defendants have also been responsible for some leaks and breaches as well.
I've got no idea. But the point about it is, though, that information was leaked. All that sort of stuff was leaked. And that's contempt of court. How come nobody's been convicted of contempt of court in this? It smells very much like being white and having might on your side works.
Well, Lani, Derek has dealt to the white media establishment. We've talked before about the different way that Maori media have covered this story. Can you explain that? Because I thought it was quite... You talked different sources, different ways of approaching it.
I sometimes get a little bit disappointed in that mainstream media, they know who the leaders of the runanga are, they know who the spokespeople are, because they see them often, you know. But I think that it's important to go beyond that. And I think that maybe mainstream media doesn't always know how to go beyond that. You know, they might have trouble. You know, you can hear what the iwi spokesman has to say, and then you can talk to the nanny at the kohanga, who had to stop those babies from crying after they, you know, that's a whole different story. That's a whole different aspect, and I don't think that sometimes, you know, I don't really like the word mainstream. It's either a good journalist goes further or they don't.
I mean, that's interesting, because what you're talking about is the experience of the people caught up in it, which was clearly quite profound. That is also this book that Valerie Moore edited very much focuses on that as well. Do you think that's that is a story that has not been told well enough.
I think Valerie Morse is also one of the defendants in the case, so I think that that's interesting that she took it upon herself to go out there and she went further. She went further to get a better story. And so if somebody who doesn't have media training can go out and take the time and you know, on very little resources and no company car and no credit card, if she can go out and get the story, then I think that mainstream or not, it's good journalism or it's not good journalism.
The interesting thing, Stephen, is that Valerie Morse has been able to publish a book about it. We are tightly constrained on anything we can say about it to avoid prejudicing the trial.
Right.
Whereas the defendants have said quite a lot on their own account.
Yeah.
How does that work?
I think the mainstream media is running scared on this one. After the prosecution for contempt of Fairfax, I think they're really... And they're now much more aware of the thicket of suppression orders surrounding it, surrounding the suppression of the evidence, surrounding the suppression of the depositions hearing. The suppression of the jury decision.
Yeah, I must say, we found it quite difficult to work out what we could say.
It's really hard. And I think you can actually say quite a lot of stuff about the raids, but as I say, they're running scared. They're waiting to see what comes out at trial when they're going to actually have the right to report on it. And especially if that trial, I think once we find that trial is to be held before a judge and not a jury, and that decision is under appeal at the moment, but if that comes out as the end result, then I think a lot of those suppression orders will be relaxed because there's then no danger of telling the jury information that might prejudice them.
Derek, there's one thing I do want to get to. In this issue of Mana magazine, where you've poured gallons of cold water on the whole thing, you said that 3 News got a tip-off that the police raid was going to come down Abel Smith Street to the house that was raided. So would you have gone out there if you'd gotten that tip too?
Oh, I'd have been recording another side of it. I mean, I wouldn't have been in Abel Smith Street, or wouldn't have been down in the Tower Flat. But look, the point about all of this is that it says something quite nasty about our media. You see, with the police making those tips, those media people didn't for a minute disbelieve the police, because they had a bias which says that's the sort of thing they would be doing. That's the sort of thing they would be doing up there. And so that's straight away they did that. Why have they backed off? I don't believe it's for the lofty reasons you said so, because they were prepared to break the law earlier when it suited their purposes to break the law and get away with it. So basically they're saying the law applies to other people, not to us.
Well, I'm sure this isn't the last we're going to hear of this. Thank you all for your time. Thank you too, Stephen Price, Lani Souter and Derek Fox. And that's our show this week. Thanks also to Brian Edwards. And thanks to you for watching. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.